and welcome to part 10 of the 16 Christmas block stitch along. I'm Louise Nichols, I'm a textile artist and I live in Cornwall, and today we're going to be stitching the front panels, the little stitch blocks that we've been stitching for weeks now. We're going to be putting them onto the background blocks. You can see I'm here in my studio today. You can see that 16 block hanging behind me. So I hope you enjoy the video. Thanks for watching. So we're here to start backing all our prints now. So all your stitch blocks are going to have fuser web ironed onto the back. So fuser web is the same as bonder web, and it's got a paper side that peels off. So we'll be cutting squares that you're going to iron onto the back of your blocks, but then all your plain backgrounds and your printed backgrounds are all going to have the lightweight iron-on interfacing ironed onto the back. So this is the same stuff that you ironed onto the back of the blocks before you stitch them, and because we're stitching into these background blocks, I also iron it onto those. Now, some of the blocks in the packs, they are slightly different sizes, so you can't really kind of cut yourself, well, you could cut yourself lots of squares all the same size and iron them on. But what I'm going to do is, I'll show you on one of these. I'm going to just lay so I've got my fabric face down, got my interfacing, move it up so it's a little bit more in the middle, there we go, interfacing on the back, and then I'm just going to cut so it's quite near the edge. I know some people like to have it hanging over, don't they? I don't tend to do that. Nothing wrong with it, it's just the way you do it, isn't it? So cut yourself out a square. So let me show you on again on one of these printed backgrounds. So again, I would just lay my interfacing over the top, like this, and then cut it out. And what I'll do is I'll do that with all the blocks, and then I'll iron it on. But I'm also going to cut my fuser web as well for my blocks that go on the front. So I've got this, this is a strip that's come off something else, so I'm just going to cut a square off this. As long as it's big enough to cover your print, and a little bit extra because you're going to be sort of trimming it down to here. So I'm just going to pop my iron on, and then we'll get these ironed on. Okay. Now, even though normally if I'm ironing fuser web on, I wouldn't necessarily bother with the baking parchment, but because we've got a bit of overhang there, I don't want this to melt under my iron. So I am going to, and I've got no overhang, I'm not going to worry about making a sandwich. Quite often I'll make a sandwich, so I've got baking parchment underneath as well as baking parchment on the top, but this sits well within that edge of the fabric, so I'm just going to iron it into position from there. So a bit of baking parchment over the top. I've got a really hot iron, so it's set on linen, and I don't have any steam on either. And then just iron across the top, not too quickly because you want to give that glue time to melt under the heat. So that's all ironed on. Sometimes if you turn it over, you might find, I know, the odd time you might get a little bit of a wrinkly edge. I just go back around with the iron on the front like this, and I would just flatten it out like that. Okay, and the backs with the interfacing on, again, just make sure. In fact, I am going to use a piece behind there because that's quite near to the edge. I don't want it to stick onto my ironing pad. Piece over the top. And again, I'm just going to very, very slowly move across there. Hopefully that will be ironed on nicely now. Yeah, that looks okay. So I'll do this one as well while I'm at it. Again, that's actually not going to go over the edge, is it? Because it sits quite nicely inside. And then a nice slow iron across the top. Again, no steam. And hopefully that will all be in place. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. So from that point now, I'm just going to switch my iron off for a minute. Move these bits of paper away. So now you can peel the paper off your fuser web or your bonder web paper. If it's not coming, I mean, I've got a few little tears in that, but I can feel it's coming away fairly easily. If you find that it's really sticking and you're having to pull, it just needs a little bit more heat. You just need a little bit more heat on there, and that will be absolutely fine. And then you're going to trim this down. So I'm just going to pop my little cutting mat there and get my, where has it gone? Oh, there it is. God, it doesn't take long, does it, for something to be under a pile of papers. And I'm going to use my rotary cutter as well for this. You can cut with scissors if you want to. You can mark it first if you want to. Whatever makes it easier for you to cut out. What you do need to be careful of is if you're going to use a ruler like this, because you've got these little raised bits, sometimes it makes it very easy for the ruler to kind of slip across while you are cutting out. Now I have had that before, and it may happen while I'm doing this little demo. I'm not going to worry about it too much, but what I am going to do is make sure I've got plenty of pressure on there to help prevent that happening. Now I'm not measuring mine. All I'm going to do, and some of these, you know, they're not quite square. Sometimes even when you're printing, it can the fabric can sort of stretch it a tiny bit. You know, even the blocks might not be that square, so I'm not too worried about that, but I do want a nice even border around the outside. So what I'm going to do is, can you see the edge of that thick blue line on my ruler? I'm lining the edge of that with the edge of the print. I don't know if you can see there as I move it into place. So that's now lined up with the edge of the print, and that's going to be my border all the way across. So I'm now going to try and cut this. There we go. And again, line up the blue edge with the edge of the print. And then this way I'm going to get an even border all the way around. So blue edge with the edge of the print. And then there it lines up with that couching on the bottom there. So I'm just going to do it so I can see those little cream stitches that we did. There we go. So I would do that with all of my blocks. I'm just going to switch my iron back on again. Don't iron on your cutting mat. Done that before. And then what you need to do is just, again, if you want to measure, that's absolutely fine, but position it sort of fairly central. And again, you can, I'm not ironing it onto this one, but you can sort of judge, can't you, which you want to make sure if it's on the stripes, that you've got an equal amount of stripe showing top and bottom. It's quite nice on there, isn't it? Quite like it on the stripes. Anyway, this one goes on the red, so I'm going to position it about there, I think. That looks good to me. Then get my baking parchment again. And I'm going to iron back over the top like that. Now sometimes where the felt is, it might not stick very well. You can always kind of go back in round the edge, look, with the iron like this. I don't really like taking my iron directly over the top of the felt. But then what you can also do is turn it over, and again I'd use that bit of baking parchment and give it an iron that way, and then that will make sure that it's really stuck down really well. Okay, so that's nice, and in fact let me just turn my iron off again. That's stuck down nicely now, and that's ready for me to stitch around the outside edge. So I would do that with all my blocks and all my backgrounds. Perhaps I'll go through with you as well the backgrounds that go with the front print. So I'll just go and get the rest of the, I'll go and get the original sample. Okay, so I'm just going to go through every block with you and show you which one needs to be on which background. So you've got your holly that goes on the stripes. Now I've tried to sort of work my stripes so if I've got one going horizontally, the next are going vertically. But it's up to you again, whichever way you want to position your stripes is fine. And when I iron onto the spots, I probably won't pay too much attention as to which way round the print is, and the same with the holly as well. Anyway, so holly on blue stripes, which is on the beigey creamy background. Your cream stocking goes onto the green background. This is the moss, I think this one was called, wasn't it? The Christmas tree that's on the beigey cream, that goes onto the grey spots with the beigey cream. Your pudding, which is on grey, goes onto the red, which was cardinal, I think, wasn't it? One of the stars goes onto the grey background. This is the slate grey. Then you've got your other pudding, which is on the creamy coloured fabric. That goes onto the holly background. Your mistletoe also goes onto blue stripes, but these are the blue stripes that have been printed onto grey. Your grey robin, which has been printed onto grey, that goes onto those green spots. Your reindeer that's on the beigey cream fabric, that goes onto this paler green, which I think was apple. Your green wreath goes onto grey stripes, and this is grey stripes on a grey fabric. The other holly goes onto the slate grey. The other star, which is, again, I think they're both printed on the same fabric anyway, aren't they? That goes onto this pale grey. Was it called light grey or silver? I can't remember now, whichever one it was. Your tree that's on grey, that goes onto the blue spots. petrol-y, bluey, grey spots. The robin goes onto the red. The reindeer goes onto the green stripes. This is the reindeer that's on grey. And finally, that lovely wreath is on the grey spots that have been printed onto grey fabric. Okay, so that should give you an idea of which ones you need to be ironing onto which backgrounds. Okay, so I'm in my studio at the moment, so I'm going to go back over to the table and start stitching around the outside of these blocks. So we've ironed all our blocks onto the backgrounds now, and all I'm going to show you are 4 blocks. I'm going to stitch 4 blocks. I'm going to show you one of each. So 1 stripe, 1 plain, 1 spots, and then there's only 1 holly anyway. But I'm just going to show you how they're stitched. So first of all, you'll need to go around the outside edge of the blocks, and all the ones that are printed on either cream or beige, you'll be stitching around the outside using the Finca size 16 shade 3000. And any that have been printed on, I haven't actually got one here, but any that have been printed on the bluey grey, like the pudding here, that's been stitched around the outside using the Finca 16 shade 8773. So that's number 11 if you've bought pack 3, and it's number 10 if you've bought pack 3 for the cream. Okay, so I'll start with the holly. Oh, get myself threaded up. So it's exactly the same stitch that we did around the outside of the felt. So it's that little up and over stitch. Doesn't matter where you start. And I'm just going to go all the way around the outside edge. So I'll start you off and then I'll bring you in once I've stitched all 4. If you would rather machine these, you can do. That won't matter. But because I'm going to machine, once these blocks are on the main background, because I'm going to machine around those, I think sometimes it's quite nice just to have those variations. Okay, so I've stitched around the outside edge of all those blocks now, all the ones that I'm going to show you. And we'll start with this one, the first one. And all I'm going to do in this, so in all the stripes here, there is a running stitch that goes across. And that running stitch is done with, if you've got the pack, it's thread 14, which is there. Okay. Otherwise, it's the size 20 crochet thread yarn that I spoke about in the last video. So I'm just going to cut myself a length off, find myself a needle. I usually use one of these chenille needles for this, because they've got quite a wide eye, and it's quite a firm thread, this one. With some of them you can sort of squash them down, can't you, to get them through the eye of the needle, but this one is quite firm and you can't do that, so you do need quite a large eye to stitch with. So all I'm going to do is, as I say, the lines of running stitch up and down. So I'm going to start here. Again, if it helps for you to draw a line down the middle of each of these stripes, if that helps you keep a straight line as you're stitching, then that's absolutely fine. Now what I'm going to do here, because I don't want to pull that thread across, even though you probably wouldn't see it on these, but I still don't want to do it on this outside edge. What I tend to do is do two at the same time and take it across here. So I'll start stitching on this edge here, and you'll probably get, I don't know, maybe three or four stitches in there. So any ridge will kind of sit near to there, so it won't be quite as visible if you get one. Tie off and then start again. In fact, I need some more thread in my needle, so you don't need to worry either about being too near to this edge, because you are going to trim it down to the edge of the print, so you will have a zigzag stitch going across there, or a hand stitch if you are going to do it all by hand. There we go. So all the stripes, all the background blocks that are stripes are stitched in exactly the same way with exactly the same thread. Okay, so that's the stripes. Now the next one along is the plain block. So on the plain block there are three lines of running stitch around the outside. And that is going back to using your size 16 Finca thread, which is number 10 if you've bought the pack. So again, I'll start you off, and here I go, tying the knot before I've threaded the needle again. I'll start you off and then I'll bring you back in again. So I'm going to work sort of around the edge. If you want to have it with your block facing you, that's absolutely fine. But I'm going to start on this corner, and you're a couple of millimeters away from that edge there. And then it's just a running stitch around the outside. Now, if it helps to draw a line, a guide line again, then please do. I'm just going to do mine by eye. In fact, I ought to go and get the in the kit where you get the large A3 stitch diagram that shows all these background stitches. I haven't got a copy of that with me. I'll go and get that in a minute. There we go then. So that's all three lines of running stitch done around the outside of that block. You probably saw me unpick a little bit and then carry on again, and it was just because one of the corners wasn't quite square enough for me. It kind of sloped out a little bit, I think it was. So I just pulled a couple of stitches back out and then carried on. So all the plain blocks, again, exactly the same stitch with exactly the same thread. Okay, so the next one in the line is the spotty background. Now for the spotty background, I mean, I've not really paid particular attention as to which way up my spots are when I've ironed on the fronts, but so no matter how, so you can probably see that this one falls slightly differently to this one, but around the outside edge of all the circles, apart from the ones where I can see that there's going to be another stitch over the top, if they're very shallow, so if it's only a tiny little bit of a circle that's showing, then I don't stitch around the outside. But otherwise they've got a running stitch around the outside of all those circles, and that again is using your Finca size 16 shade 3000, which is number 10 in your pack 3. And then there are French knots in the middle. So this one has the French knots are using number 2 thread in your pack, which is the DMC size 8 shade 413. And I'll do those French knots in a minute. Now, depending on the spots, there are different colours inside, but I'm not going to demonstrate all of them because it would just take too long. The video will be too long. But the next spotty one down is the robin on the green spotty background, and that's exactly the same as the Christmas tree, in that it has the French knots. They're all done with that grey, the DMC grey. And then if I just turn this over, on the bottom row you've got the Christmas tree on the blue spotty background. So again, all the outside rings, they're all around the outside of the circles. It's all done with your cream, but the inside of these spots, the French knots are done with shade or thread number 3 in your pack, DMC size 8, and it's shade 415. So that's the thread that you'll do your French knots with on the blue spots. And then finally, the last in the row, this lovely wreath. I think this is one of my favourite blocks, this wreath. I just absolutely love it. Anyway, the French knots on there are done with that lovely green. So in your pack, thread number 6, or it's the DMC shade 580, another size 8. Okay, so again, I'm going to start you off and then I'll bring you back in once I've finished stitching. So with this, because this is quite a thin thread, again, I tend to sort of carry across on the back. I mean, some of the reasons, it's not always because of the thickness, you know, the thread showing underneath. Sometimes the more you carry across on the back, it can sort of pull your fabric in one direction or another. It can sort of distort it a little bit. So again, that's another reason I don't always like carrying across too much on the back. Okay, so I'm going to just start here on this circle here. So it's just a few running stitches around the outside of those circles, like that. So I will carry across to this one here. And I'll go around the outside of that one. But then from there, I wouldn't go to either of those spots there. So I am going to knot on the back. And then start again. So here, these two, I'm not going to stitch around these, but rather than starting stitching around the outside from here, which means then you've got to go across to do this next one, if I start stitching here, by the time I've gone round that circle and finished here, you've only got a short distance to take you across here. So that's what I'm going to do with this one. Oh, and actually I did go in that last little break, I did go and fetch that large background block stitch diagram. So you can see on here all those stitches are shown around the outside of those blocks. So you can refer to that if you've bought the pack. And then obviously the zigzaggy stitch on there is the zigzag that I'm going to be doing on the machine, but that won't be until the next video. So I'm going to go around the outside of this. And then I'm ready to go around that one there as well. I think the nice thing about stitching these blocks individually, rather than having them on a big piece of fabric or working on a big piece, is it's a lot easier to handle. And you can sit, can't you, and stitch. You can have them on your knee. If you're following the videos, you can have them on your tablet or your laptop and just follow them. I'm going to take that one across actually as well, because that's not too far. Yeah, and you can literally just do a little stitch along, can't you, while you're watching, whereas it's not quite so easy once everything's on that big piece of fabric. Now here I could either go across to that one there or that one, but I'm going to go across to this one and stitch around the outside of this, because then when I start this one, that will be ready to go around the next circles there. It's a beautiful morning here this morning as well. We have had a really wet few days here in Cornwall. I don't know about you, but this morning was frosty, sunny, very, very still, absolutely beautiful. Anyway, I'm going to carry on stitching the rest of these then, and I'll bring you back in at the end. Okay, so that's all the running stitch done around the outside of the little circles. And so the next thing are the French knots. So I'm going to get my size 8 thread and my favourite needle that I think is in here. Yeah, here it is for doing French knots. Get that threaded up. Now, if you've got, again, little kind of circles like this, I wouldn't put a French knot in there or there. But this one here, definitely, and probably this one, there's a little bit more of this one showing as well. And again, around the outside, so this one here, I wouldn't put a French knot in here either, or in here, because it's going to get stitched over. Okay, but you can judge that as you're stitching, and I won't be carrying any threads across on this one because again, I don't want those lumps underneath. So come up almost in the center of your circle, round your needle twice, tip back in, slide your knot down, push your needle through, and there's your French knot. Not as central as I wanted it, but there you go. So I'm going to do that on all my circles now. If you don't want to do French knots, you could always add some little beads. And we will be stitching our beads on, actually, talking about beads. We're going to be doing that as well before the end of this video. Oh, that won't go. That was a bit tough to get through there. Sometimes you end up kind of trying to go through a knot, don't you, that's already there from a previous stitch. Okay, finally that's all the French knots done. I felt like that took me forever. Anyway, all done. So as I explained before with the spots, all the outside edges exactly the same. It's just those French knots in the middle that will vary in colour. And if you want to use a different colour, you know, that's absolutely fine. So the last one I'm going to demonstrate of this is the holly. Now there's only one of these anyway. So first of all, I'm going to do down the centre, get the original here, down the centre. They don't stand out an awful lot, but again, it's adding to the texture. But there are some little lines of couching, so I'm going to do that first, and then it's back to French knots. You'll be French knotted out, won't you, by the end of this? Okay, so the little couch line down the centre of the holly leaves is using the green. Now, if you want to use, again, if you want to use a grey, or you want to do even red down the middle, then, you know, that's absolutely fine. And it's that size 8 again. The DMC 580 is the shade, and if you've got the pack, it's number 6 on your in your selection of threads. So let me get my needle again and get threaded up. Now they are slightly curved where I've carved the lino away. So what I'm going to do, come up at the beginning there like that, and then go in at the end. Now normally when it's a curve I would leave it loose, but because these are only very, very slightly curved, I'm going to knot the back because I don't want to carry across, but I'm just not going to sort of pull it too tight. So there's just a little bit of, can you see, there's a tiny bit of slack there, which will allow me just to pull it into that curve as I'm stitching it. And I'm going to do that with all of these. So wherever you see a line, apart from, again, if it's right on the edge, so I won't do this one here because the zigzag will cover that over. I might not even do that one there, look, but all the others I will do. And again, I don't know if that's been ironed on the same way. I don't think it is. No, the patterns are different way round. So I've not paid too much attention to the way that the holly, because it's multi-directional anyway, isn't it? So I don't think it matters too much. There we go. So that's all the little stitches down the middle of the holly leaves, and then I'm going to couch over the top of those with our general sewing thread that we've used to do all the other couching. So, and it's the cream that I'm going to be stitching over the top with. So that is thread number 1 in your kit, and it's the Gutermann shade 111 if you've bought it. Oh, didn't knot anything there. Okay, so then you can just use your thumb just to make that little stitch just sit on that curve there, and you're just doing that little couch over the top there just to hold it in place. I say it's green on green, so it's not something that stands out an awful lot, but it's adding a little bit of texture. I felt with this, because it was quite a busy background pattern and you've got quite a lot going on in the pudding as well, I didn't want the background pattern to overshadow what was going on the front, and that was why I kept it to the green. So I'm going to stitch all of these and then I'll bring you back in again at the end. So that's all the couching done, and the last thing to do on this background are the French knots. Now I wanted quite chunky French knots for this, so this is using the thread at double thickness, and it's the Anchor shade 20 size 8, or in your kit it's number 8. So I'll cut some of that off and thread up. Now again, just think about, because you're going to be trimming to the edge of this, so I wouldn't put a French knot here. I probably won't put one here actually either, because you're going to end up machining over the top of it, and especially if it's a chunky one, sometimes it can kind of throw your foot on your machine off, can't it, if it's a bit of a lump to go over, but all the others will be fine. So in the middle of the circle, come up, round your needle twice and back in, so you get a really nice red knot. So it's like a little berry on top of that circle. Again, I won't be carrying any threads across, so all these will be done individually. So I'll carry on with these and then I'll bring you back in. So that's all the excuse me, that's all the French knots done. So now we're going to stitch on some of these beads. So the pudding, I ought to have a little pot really, didn't I, to put these in. I'm just going to put them up here on a mat. So I've stitched all the beads on using my number 1 thread, just my general sewing thread. If you want to use a colour that matches the bead, then that's absolutely fine. So I'm just going to thread my needle and I'm going to stitch them on with my thread doubled. So if I can get hold of both ends and tie a knot. There we go. So I'm going to do the pudding first, being as that's the one that's in front of me. So it's just one bead right in the middle of those holly leaves there. So I'm going to just come up there in the middle, about there, thread on my bead, and go back in. So I don't know, you probably can't see there because it's cream on cream, but I'm going back in just over a little way. Try not to knot the thread as I'm pulling it back down again. There we go. And I'm going to put a few stitches through that one there. If you want it to sit flat like that, you can do if you want to, but I think I quite like it stood up on its side on this one, so I think 3 stitches should do it. Some of these beads, these little wooden ones, have got where they've been painted, you just need to poke the hole out a little bit. Anyway, yeah, that feels nice and firm, so I'm going to just tie the back of that now. A couple of knots in the back. So that's your pudding. And then next I've got the Christmas tree. Now, as I explained in the last video, those little buttons and things that I used on the original, before I realised I was going to be doing it, you know, using it as a stitch along, I'd use those lovely little tiny, they're really matte buttons, and I can't find them anywhere, not enough to be able to supply them in a kit. So although on the original the tree has a red button, oh no, it's not that tree, is it? Where are we? Actually, it's a creamy coloured button that I've used on this. I'm going to stitch one of those red beads again onto the top, which I still think will look really nice. So as before, double thickness, I've knotted the end, come up, and then just go back in a little way across. Trying not to knot it on your way. What have I done here? Hang on, it's gone through itself, I think. Yeah, I've gone through there we go. And again, if you want it to lay flat, you could stitch it down like that and just do some little, like a donut bead in it, go around the outside, but I want mine to be, I think, standing sort of upright like that. So a few stitches through there, and that should hold that in place. A little bit wonky, but who's looking? Okay, so that's the tree. A couple of knots on the back. To show you that, there's a tree. Nothing on the stocking, so nothing to go on there. And then the holly has 3 beads, so I should have enough thread on there, hopefully, to stitch all 3 beads on. If I show you on there, you can see where they're positioned. I'll try and stitch them similarly to that. So I just need 3 more beads. I'll tip them on my mat up here. I've got them on a mat, look. Here, so it just sort of stops them from rolling away. I've got a little tiny dish that I quite often use, but it's over in the studio, so I'm not going to go and fetch that now. So there are 2 sort of here and 1 in this top corner here. So I'm going to start with the first one up in the top corner here. And then that should help you position the other 2. I might not have enough thread actually on the needle, but we'll see how it goes. So 3 stitches through there again. And then I want my other 2 to sort of fall here and here. So I'm going to come up there, get my bead, and the same thing again. If you can keep your thumb in like that, hopefully that will stop it from going through itself like mine did a minute ago. So 3 stitches through there, and then I would say probably about there for your third one. Let's see if I can just squeak another couple of stitches out of this thread. Oh, I think I am just going to manage it, aren't I? One more stitch. Yeah, gosh, that was tight, wasn't it? There we go then, that's all 3. I will pop in a little clip as well of me stitching on the little silver beads on the mistletoe, because they do lay flat, and I'll show you how I stitch those on. But I haven't ironed the backing onto those yet. I wanted to get on and get these filmed, so once I've done that I will pop a little video in. So that's stitching on your beads as well. The coconut beads don't come for a while yet, so I'll just talk about where the other beads go. So obviously we've got another pudding, so you'll use another of your red beads there. And then also I'm going to use a red bead in the middle of the stars instead of those wooden things that are there. Again, I didn't have many of those. 3 more beads for the holly there, a red one on the top there, and then you've got a red one on your reindeer nose. So they're all the ones that will need the red beads, and then, as I say, I will show you how I've stitched these down because I have laid them flat on the mistletoe. So that's it for this video, and then the next time we come back we'll be backing these with fuser web, trimming them down and getting them positioned onto the main background fabric, and then I'm going to see how the timings go for that one because I don't want the video to be too long. If it isn't too long I will complete the whole thing in the next video, otherwise there will be another video. Okay, so thank you so much for watching again. We're getting near the end, aren't we now? So I hope you're enjoying it, and I'll see you next time. So I'm just going to show you how I stitch my beads onto the mistletoe. So if I just show you the original again. So here it is, look. So you can see there are 3 beads, and I've sewn them on sort of flat. So you can see the hole in the middle, and then the stitches go around the outside. As I said on the previous video, I can't get those, or I've not been able to find those sort of champagne-y coloured beads that are on the original. So if you've bought a kit from me, a pack 3, then the ones that we're going to be using are like a matte silver, and I gave the measurements in the previous video. If you have had a pack from me, you will have got, or you should have 5 in there. So if you want to add some extra beads, then you can. That's absolutely fine. Okay, so I'm going to stitch those on. So I'm using my thread number 1, which is the shade 111 of the Gutterman just general sewing thread. And I've got my needle threaded just at single thickness. Now the first one sort of goes here, so you've got this top bit of the mistletoe, and it just goes in here. So just come up sort of roughly where you want that bead to go. If you want to stitch through a couple of times before you start, you can do. Then thread your bead on, like that. And you can see it's sitting nice and flat there. So I usually do, I'm going down right on the edge there, and then I'm going to do another one. I'm not coming back up the middle, I'm coming back up the side, on the opposite side, and then I'm going to do one back down the middle. So then that should hold that sort of fairly flat now while I do the rest of the stitches. Now you can come back up through the middle, or you could come in from the outside again if you want to. But I'm just going to do another 3 or 4 little catching stitches around the outside of there. So I've got a total of, I'll probably have six stitches around the outside of these little beads. Like that. That's plenty of stitches there to hold that on. And because they're quite spread out, I'm tying off on the back before I do the next one. Which is about there. Pulled that thread through there from underneath. Okay, there we go then. That's the little bead stitched onto the mistletoe. And when I am going to stitch, let me get one of these out to show you. So for the stars, move this out of the way. For the stars, they had originally one of these kind of like wooden donut beads in the middle, but I'm going to stitch one of my little wooden beads into the middle. I'm going to stitch around it with the cream thread. If you would rather use red so it blends in, that's absolutely fine, but I'm going to stitch this on in the same way as I've just stitched those silver beads. So when we stitched it on for the holly, we had them up this way, didn't we, so that they you can't see the hole, but when they go in the middle of the star, I am going to have that hole in the middle.